Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Well, welcome back to the Agents of Innovation podcast. I am your host, Francisco Gonzalez, and I have with me Gaby. Gaby, thanks so much for joining us here on the Agents of Innovation podcast.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, Gaby is from Venezuela, but we are sitting here in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And if you happen to see the previous guest on our last episode, Jerz is your boyfriend, and I know you guys met in Colombia. We're going to get to that story a little bit later, but we're here in Argentina where you guys have been for quite some time. And I just want to remind everybody, if you are new to the Agents of Innovation podcast, or even if you've been listening for a while, make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, whether it is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. And also, please write a review. We'd love to hear what you think about this episode and previous episodes, and also that helps move the podcast up in rankings. So thanks so much for helping us out with all of that, wherever you are listening or watching. And if you are listening and you want to watch, you could watch us here in beautiful Buenos Aires, Argentina on YouTube. So be sure to pop over to YouTube as well for that. But speaking of, Gaby, we're here in Argentina. The last time I saw you, really the first time I saw you as well, was in Medellin, Colombia, when Fearless Journeys did our group trip there, and you and Jerz joined us for a wonderful dinner there in Medellin. But we had connected, me and a couple of the travelers, like I know my friend Ben Newman, I think Kevin Comer, they've come on a bunch of the trips, and we started following both you and Jerz on Twitter a while back, and really liked what you were doing, especially with the Global Spanish School you're doing. So, but let's go back to the beginning. And in addition to everything you're doing now, I want to hear a little bit about, you grew up in Venezuela. So tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Venezuela, and then the decision to leave about 10 years ago.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a beautiful introduction, Francisco. And yes, such a long time that we met in Medellin, right?
Yeah, feels like it, right?
Yeah.
Less than 6 months ago.
Yeah, and how everything moves so fast, so quick in the world. Many things to tell you also in this podcast. But yeah, in Venezuela, I grew up under a regime that we all know, that is, it was under Chavez. I come from a really normal family, really humble beginnings. I can tell you, like, all the times that I was waiting for electricity, like many other Venezuelans, the lack of food, the lack of opportunities. And I always see the positive things, the opportunities. And when I decided to immigrate, like millions of people from Venezuela, I was only 18 years old. And that was one of the first decisions that I took to take an adventure in the world and decide my own future, decide what I wanted to accomplish, and to do what it's meant to be, which is a purpose that every individual has on earth. And that's what I did with that motivation.
And you had moved to Colombia at that time, right?
That's right, yeah.
But that wasn't your first time outside of Venezuela. Can you tell us about some of the other, travel experiences or educational, what have you, that you've had outside of Venezuela before you made that big move?
I think that all people that was born in the 90s like me, we all experienced situations that the only purpose that we were just in Venezuela was just waiting to leave. Any opportunity that we were seeing there, it was just with the intention to go abroad and have better chances to have a better quality of life. And when I was 11 years old, my mom met the Rotary organization, which is a no-profit organization for doctors.
Oh, wow.
And my mom told me, hey, I know how motivated you are in learning languages, in learning different stuff. I was always a geek girl, passionate about speaking. I was always an extrovert. And my parents told me, you should try to earn that scholarship. And since I was 11 years old, I was going quickly just to help to plant trees, helping different nursing houses in Venezuela, everything just to be in presence of many doctors that they can at least remember my name. And that was the opportunity for me to win a scholarship to go to France, all paid. And because I was always in different activities, I was asking to my parents to always put me in different theaters, activities like theater, like gymnastic, and thanks to that, it was my first trip in 2013 to go to finish my high school in France with everything paid by the French institution.
Wow. And so obviously you're a native Spanish speaker. Did you know French before that? Did you get a chance to learn it there?
Not at all. The French culture was one of the most difficult experiences for me because you needed to speak the language or they were not going to include you. And I was super different. I was not even able to speak fluent English. They were not able to speak English because I was in a small town. And I forced myself, and also that organization told me, you must speak in a trimester at least a little bit of French because we're going to return you back. And that created a need. And in 3 months, I was able to be conversational, everyday practicing, but zero knowledge with the language before or teachers before. It was just by different methods I applied when I was 15.
And how long were you in France?
For a year.
A year? And so after the year, how did you feel about the language? Were you fluent or?
Yeah, I actually speak like about after 6 months. The organization gave me like a test to see if I was still like a valuable person for the organization. That's how it works in Rotary. And I passed after 6 months a B1, and then at the end of the year B2.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's amazing. So today, how many languages do you speak?
Because of that, I understood how opportunities can come in the way. I started to learn 7 at this point. Yeah.
Wow. So tell me, so I'm going to guess, obviously English you're speaking right now, Spanish, French. What other languages do you know?
Portuguese, because it's also the second language here in Latin America. Italian.
Brazilians might say the first, but yeah.
yeah, Brazilian can be also be say like that. Italian, I went to Italy 2 years ago to learn the language and went to finish culinary course.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, and Russian, I lived in Russia in 2019 before COVID, and Greek as well.
So let's hear about your experience living in Russia in 2019.
That's right. Well, at that time, I wanted to do something different because I was taking kind of the rabbit hole of freedom and inflation, but really get into details at that time. And I was at that time investing in Bitcoin. The first time I invested in Bitcoin, it was in 2017. And in 2019, there was the Bitcoin pump immediately to 12,000 at that time. It was the highest point back in May. And it was the first time I saw like enough cash for me to say, I want to do this. And I contacted different people on a Facebook group that actually allowed me to know that there was another organization to go to work abroad, which it was called ISEC. And they told me, one of those people told me, hey, actually I work there. If you want, let's go to a meetup in Barranquilla and I can just show you how legitimate is this, right?
And for those not familiar, Barranquilla is in Colombia.
Yeah, it's in Colombia. It's in Colombia. And yeah, that's how actually was pre-selected. And then I went to Russia with the person that contacted me to go to be an English teacher in Russia.
Oh, wow. So how long were you there in Russia?
For a year.
A year. And you learned Russian then?
Yes. Well, I was able to communicate, right? But to speak about political stuff and all that, I was not able to. But yeah, like to maintain like an intermediate, to say different stuff, I was able to speak the language.
That's fantastic. So, but you had already moved to Colombia going to Russia, right?
That's right.
And so when did you come back to Colombia? Was it right before COVID? I mean,
yeah, it was in January. Everything was turning really weird in Russia. I was always said that they knew something because everybody was wearing masks during that December. I was in St. Petersburg, and I remember that something was off. I don't know if it was the news, but everybody was paranoid, And I decided to go back to Venezuela because I said I don't feel also this is part of my culture. I miss Latin America.
Yeah.
And after, 10 months already alone because I didn't have friends, boyfriend, anything. I was really alone there. I decided to go back And that's when everything started to be more weird internationally. And when I arrived back in February, they were giving the announcements, and in March, everything was shut down in Colombia.
Yeah, so I don't know when you started it, but tell us a little bit. I think your Twitter handle might have changed from, or I don't know, maybe not, but I know I learned about you as Gaby Global Spanish. And so I don't know if that was the Twitter title or the Twitter handle or whatever, but you've got the Global Spanish School. Tell me when you started that, what you do, and kind of what the broader purpose is.
Yeah, so the handle is Gaby Vivas BTC.
What is the handle?
Gaby Vivas BTC.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes so everybody can get that.
And I'm gonna send you that in case. But yeah, it's Gaby Vivas BTC, and yeah, I'm the founder of Global Spanish and Global Portuguese. Global Spanish before was called I Amigo School. It was the beginning, and right after COVID, I started with that project. And nowadays, Global Spanish is a live business that is operating in all over Latin America to help people that want to learn Spanish, and also for kids right now. We just opened those operations, and we work with teachers in Colombia, in Argentina, and Brazil. And we help people that wants to learn according to their availability. And it's the first school that actually you can reschedule, cancel as many times you want, and you're not going to be losing those lessons, because it's within the subscription. So we work as a subscription model of business, and that's how we have been operating and help us to grow as well as an academy.
You know, one thing I noticed, so I went down to Guatemala to live about a year after COVID started. Mm-hmm. And so they were just starting to, apparently they were really locked down there for like 6 months. I don't know how it was in Colombia, but Guatemala was much more locked down than, most places in the United States. But then they started reopening, and I taught at a university there and everything. But as I started talking to people, including people who do, it's really big in Guatemala, especially in Antigua, to have in-person Spanish schools. Like people travel to Antigua to do all sorts of Spanish schools. But I started, talking to friends of friends that are Guatemalans that teach Spanish in person traditionally. They said, well, during COVID, they had to do everything online. But I said, how did that go? And they said, well, actually, I have a lot more business online. And in fact, most of their business still is online to this day. And some of them do like a hybrid, and they do some in person and some online. But I just found that very interesting. And I don't know if you saw that happening, or if that was the opportunity you saw to maybe start something online as well, because most of your is online, right? Yeah,
completely online. Yeah, that's right. Like during the COVID, I was also like working with an institution, but this institution at that time was not fully developed. Like I was in the sales department, and they were not able even to close. They didn't have even a curriculum or anything. But at that time, I knew how to create all that because of my experience in different languages. And I said, no way, I can do this better, and I can also help in a better and genuine way without wasting people's time. And for me, time is so valuable. And that's how I started as well. I bought a group in 2020, a Facebook group that allow us to bring clients, and it literally cost like $50, $70 at that time. And that was literally the first way of marketing that I learned. So yeah, it was part of the first principle of marketing that I understood. And also was the beginning of understanding a new market like the American and Canadian. And even though we receive more people from Middle East, my first target was always the U.S., and it was the most complicated one as well, because the market was oversaturated, because many people were coming in after the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you as well, who teaches the classes? Are you one of the instructors, and do you have other instructors?
No, not right now, because I'm in the right part of the business, which is management and hiring and make sure that everything is right on the track. So we have right now 10 people in the team that all of them are working with the lessons, and they normally work according to their time, their schedule. And there are others on all the marketing strategy, like all the visual images, reels, curriculum structure, platforms. So we have a lot of work behind an academy. I think that's the most essential is the talent, the human talent that we have been welcoming for the past few years.
And what languages can people learn through the Global Spanish School?
Spanish and Portuguese.
Spanish and Portuguese, so it's not just Global Spanish, right?
Yes.
And I noticed you added that Portuguese element. So one of the things I found interesting and sometimes you meet people, well, you follow people online, maybe you see their website, things like that, but it isn't until you meet in person sometimes that you have a fuller conversation. That's why I love podcasts too, so we could really dive a little deeper. But one of the things, we heard from you and Jerz, obviously both of you like to, work remotely as you travel. Obviously you spend a lot of time maybe more in Colombia or right now Argentina, but you can travel anywhere as well, and so you're able to run this online school from pretty much anywhere. But the other thing I noticed is you seem to mention that you help people learn Spanish for the purpose they need it for, right? So can you explain that a little bit in what you're trying to do to help people really learn it for the purpose they need it for?
Sure. So actually, the most essential thing is to communicate. Any human needs to have that intimate connection with anyone. A language is an essential part for that, for businesses, for protocol, for raising a family. It's the connection of everything. It's what it can bring also peace in a home. So the communication is one of the fundamentals that I even bring operating here. And the need of speaking another language and doing residences, passports, you don't know how many steps you need to do, and the bureaucracy sometimes you need to go through, and you don't speak the language. So that's why I feel that my purpose is to help others to communicate how they feel, what they feel, and how to achieve what they have in mind. And that's the purpose of Global right now. And thanks to Jerz that give us that purpose as well, to help others to settle down in residences. We give them all that package, all that service. Hey, I know this is frustrating. That I know that could be new for you to get to a new country. Nothing that if you have a meeting at 5, people will arrive in at 7. And the bureaucracy is like if you need documents, but in case that the person didn't wake up in the right food, they're going to be asking you for more documentation. That's why we are here, to help you to go through all that, but also that you have people on your side, to welcome you, to explain to you what's going on, and also to help you through those steps.
So, but the better thing, right, would be to be fluent in the language yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So you can understand all the documents that are being presented to you, the cultural things, all those things. And also, I've seen you even mention to people online. By the way, you have a great Twitter account too, and you give lots of great advice. And one of the things I've noticed you also say is, "Hey, for you maybe like American men that want to come down to Latin America and meet some, Latina women, you might want to like learn the language so that you can have a better conversation." And I say this, I've observed this several times now. And one was recently. I'm not going to mention the country, but I was in a Latin American country, and we had just met a couple that was sitting next to us. The woman was from the country. The man was from Florida, actually, and he was a non-Spanish speaker. Like I don't know if he knows 5 words of Spanish. And they were clearly dating, and he clearly visits a couple times a year, and then after they talked to us, well, he talked to us kind of. I saw them go back to talking, and he literally was Google translating. This was their relationship, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me," And this person mentioned that he came to this country several times a year, and like, I was like, "Man, maybe I would learn a little more Spanish." I mean, I'm not saying you have to be like totally fluent, but at least like give a little effort, because this, and then maybe on the other side too, right? She didn't know any English, so I'm sure that could be helpful for her too if she's trying to meet American men, right? To know some English. But yeah, so what can you say? I mean, you it could be business relationships, it could be personal relationships, romantic relationships, whatever. But all of this is language is so important, and you can understand a lot more. And I think that gives a lot of credence to what you're doing to try to help people with like the different purposes they need it for. But yeah, I don't know what else you want, if you wanted to add anything else to that.
No, I agree with you. Especially relationships are difficult, complex, no matter what type of relationship you have, even with your neighbor, with the people that you cross by. You need to develop certain connection, and that connection through the communication, the feedback you receive. So nowadays with the technology, of course, you cannot feel because that got lost in translation.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, like, for example, not even that, when you have situations at immigration, right? Like, I don't know, like why you're coming for a couple of times per year. Eventually, you're going to be asking you in that, in Spanish, or even if you got lost in translation, you could say it in English. But what you don't know if the other person is speak fluent English. So there are many consequences of speaking a language that make everything so easier, and even just to have those long-term relationships that allow you to connect. But it's true that I mentioned that most likely my Twitter is for the followers are men normally. I always tend to go on that way because I noticed that most of them was just to see what is to date on the other side of the of the ocean. And I always told them that the only difference is just the language and a culture, but at the same time, they need to be fully open to understand those differences that could be a shock for them or could be, lacking translation. So it's 100% essential to speak a language if you want a long-term relationship, because at the same time, intercultural relationships can bring problems in the long term, and the idea is at least to be in an agreement.
So let me ask you, you now know 7 languages, right? And you advise people, you teach people, you have a whole company, helping people to learn different languages. In addition to learning the grammatical things and the actual words and the vocabulary, what would you say are some of the maybe daily or weekly practices someone should be doing to really better learn and understand another language?
I'm going to tell you my secret. When I have something to solve, I try to think in the other language because you become more rational. And when you're learning another language, you need to think what you're going to be saying. It means that solutions are going to be going on the way as well. So when I was learning, for example, Portuguese, I put its scenarios in my mind. I'm literally right now living, like employees, people that I need to manage, hiring process. And those type of situations never existed when I was learning the language. But I was thinking and planning ahead how rational I needed to be to go ahead. So that's the idea. Like, in order that you learn a language in time, you need to find the purpose for what is the mission and what is the context. At least 2 sentences per day, but you can practice. The consistency is key. So no matter, people sometimes compare with others. I always tell them, why you compare with others when only you are your competition?
Yeah.
Just try to be focused on yourself. You will see how beautiful it will be if you do that.
I don't play golf for a lot of reasons, but I hear that in golf, you could be out on the course with other people, but you're really not playing other people. You're playing yourself, because it doesn't really matter how well the other person does. I mean, the only thing that matters is that they might beat you if they do it better than you. But the thing is, you are always trying to play yourself and be better than you were, the last time you played. And so it doesn't, it's only going to matter if you focus on your own game in golf. See, in tennis, where I come from, you could make another player play bad because you could hit the ball harder, you can move them around, all these sorts of things. But in golf, nobody can touch your ball, right? I mean, you do it yourself. And so that's what you're saying. Like, just focus on yourself with your language. Don't compare. Maybe other people are doing something better. Maybe they know 7 languages. Gosh, I'm just trying to get a second one down, and this woman over here has 7 down. But not to really compare, right? Really just kind of focus on yourself.
And there's people that say, hey, I need to learn in 6 months that, and it's okay. The pressure that you have, it's absolutely amazing. But think about how many days you're gonna be just honest with yourself to do that practice, because anyone can learn any language on their own. But when we are here in this type of business, it's like okay, let's make this track for you, and you become sovereign in your own learning experience. And we even have created multiple roadmaps for students to tell them, hey, this is how you need to learn, because how this is how you behave in the language or in the learning journey, and this is how you can even practice without us. So that's
That's good.
also practice. Yeah.
So, for those who might have listened to the previous episode with Jerz, who really helps people, advises people in some ways as a consultant, I guess, to get different passports, different residencies, bank in different countries, all these sorts of things, right? But a lot of it is, there's also a lot of like digital nomads these days. Maybe they're going to live long term in a country. Maybe it's temporary, but it's some length of time. But maybe they're going to move permanently somewhere, right? Whatever the case might be. I say that in that obviously learning the language of the country you're going to be going to, whether it's for a short period, long period, maybe permanent. That's helpful. But how would you say is someone who's trying to who's maybe trying to get used to working in another country? Or working from another country, or trying to learn a language in the other country, what are some of the best ways they can integrate into the culture as they're either studying there or working there?
That's a good question. Depends. It always will depend on the intention of the person, because there are people that come to Latin America nowadays and they come for pleasure, just to enjoy the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And there are others that simply come for studying and finish their degree, but they are isolating in their room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that I always try to tell them is try not to impose your way of thinking, because that's going to create a barrier between you and new people that are actually pretty open to know you. And just because you're bringing cultural stuff or cultural trauma sometimes of where you're coming, you're putting that negativity, like, I have a bad experience in this country, that's why everybody's like that. No, it's not like that. Just try not to impose, always be open. And if you're coming for work or study, it will always depend how you treat the other person. In any culture, it's just the respect. If you go to Asia, if you go to Russia, I smile, it will be weird, but they know you're not from there, and they'll try at least to ask you, hey, how are you? Or they just look at you and just the rest of the connection if they see you daily. So the suggestion is always, when you're trying to learn also a language, the second part, and if you're in an environment that you need to go every day, just pick up a hobby. Example, you like wine, you like cigars. You like cigars, right?
Right.
But there are a big group of cigars here. You can smoke your cigar with other people here, enjoy the quality of delicious tobacco, right? You can just go to play golf with other Argentinians, but pick up a hobby that allows you to be entertained and you enjoy the process. There are men that just likely to be dating multiple women. I have heard that, right?
Yeah.
And they say, I want to learn that way. And they say, it's fantastic. And as long as you practice and you get in touch with that, just not to impose the way of you think, because that's gonna bring you another way of experience in the language.
Yeah, I think when you're traveling, it could be living in another country, it could be just traveling there for a short-term experience. I think it's good what you said. I mean, to be open, have kind of an open, curious mindset about other people. I mean, that's kind of why I've always loved traveling. I just love, I love history. I love just seeing other places that might have some historic importance and going to those places, but also just seeing how other things are done, learning how other things. So it's funny you mentioned the cigars, right? Because it's no secret to anybody that follows me anywhere that how much I love cigars. But when I was in Guatemala, I just was looking for a cigar lounge. Like I'm not even sure I was really caring like that I was going to meet people there. I'm not sure that really came into my mind. I'm like, maybe it was part of thinking that, but it was more just, hey, I want to go somewhere where I can hang out and chill and grab a cigar, and where can I do that? And anyway, I ended up finding a great place in Guatemala City, the Caranto Club, and I met, oh my gosh, it was crazy the amount of people I met there, and then the domino effect of people they introduced me to over time. Just this now a little bit of that is the cigar culture, in terms of just being able to sit down for an hour or 2 hours, whatever it is, having a cigar with people and having conversation. But I think also people there were maybe it was like a dual curiosity, right? It's like, oh, you're interested in us, well, we're interested in you, kind of thing, right? So like you said, people really are kind of open, And also, I think there's a lot of, when we think about maybe conflicts between countries, I think we really have to remember those are between governments and not between the people. I mean, it can be between the people sometimes, but I was just recently in Cuba for the first time. My dad is from there, and there were several times when I was walking out of a restaurant or something. We were with a big group, and somebody from Cuba would just say, we love Americans, we love the United States. The problems are just between the governments. I mean, literally, they were just very blunt. And I thought that's just the best way to think about that. So even when there's but I say that because sometimes you see things on the news or the media or whatever it is about a perception of another place or another types of people. But when you get down there, it's these are just people like everybody else. They want to, they care about their family, they care about their work, they care about their safety, all these sorts of things, and they just want to live their life. And so I think having that open, curious mindset to learning is a really great way to meet people. And I love that you said, hobbies. So whether it's cigars or golf or polo or whatever it is, people get into in different countries,
Yeah, and also open questions. It's super basic to learn what is your favorite place to come here. ¿Cuál es tu lugar favorito? It's just those simple questions that you learn the basic, just to ask to your portero, to the guy that is downstairs, hey, what place do you recommend me in his language? Why not? And then then after a few weeks or a few days, he will become your best friend, and he's gonna be helping you. It's a way how you treat others and just made it easy. And I believe that the interesting thing about cigars and all these environments is that most of people also in Latin America, or from the experience I got in Europe, they tend to speak in English because all of them are well traveled, and that's also fine. But when you connect with their families in an intimate way, you will see that not all of them speak fluent English, and you want to connect with them to know more about their past experiences, what else about the culture. And those are just the basic stuff that we always mention. Hey, what things you could actually just ask in that interaction, what else you can just say here, and feel free, create that personality of you, who you become in the language. And that's what we also teach.
One thing I have found helpful as I'm trying to get better at Spanish is when I get Spanish-speaking friends who are willing to be patient. And, I got to give a shout-out to my friend Fernando in Guatemala. I was down there for 2 weeks in... Well, actually, a different Fernando than I had on my podcast. But another Fernando. Oh, that Fernando's great, too. But another one who... I told him I was down there in Antigua, and I was doing Spanish, one-on-one instruction for about 4 hours a day for 2 weeks, and we decided to go have lunch, after that. And he said, "Well, we'll have the whole lunch in Spanish," and we did. And I hadn't seen him in probably a year at that point, and so we did. We had a whole, and he had to be patient because I had to go very slow sometimes and all that. But it was really great, and I came out of that just with so much more confidence. And I try to do this with my Spanish-speaking friends in South Florida, and they don't have as much patience. After about 3 minutes, they're like, "Yeah, let's go back to English, right?" But you've got to be persistent about it.
That's something that I want to mention in this podcast is that reminds me of the experience I had in Russia. I haven't seen them in 5 years, but when they always grind me, they grind me just in Russian. It's just the connection because they knew they taught me that.
That's good.
And, and that's connections. All people that I still get in touch in those countries, they just speak to me in their original language. Like the teacher that helped me to finish the culinary course in Italy still send me the recipes in Italian. Tell me all the stuff, the tips in Italian. So when I notice that is not even what type of business is bringing me. No, it's bringing me the people that want to be in the long term in my life. And that's a way also to filter sometimes the energy that you want also to allow in your life and what others you don't want. So I also put it in that holistic way because I see it on that way as well. And it's maybe deep, it's maybe for profound, but it's how you also identify the many circumstances. Like the other day I was saying on Twitter X, the Argentinian culture has changed dramatically, their language, their accent, right? Before, people used to speak like the Italian accent, intonation, the phonetic as well. And has changed. Everything is changing. So now you listen more that they have a neutral accent, or tend to like to go like Chilean with this mix of internet that the globalization is giving. So when you start seeing that, you start seeing also can predict the economy, and that's what I also have done through languages to see what is coming, because after all that mix that we're all having on the internet, you can also see that, or like to see it in the future what's gonna be happening.
Yeah. Well, Gabby, how can people connect with you, and also how can they sign up for for your Global Spanish School?
Sure. So we are on Google, globalspanish.com, global/.com, spanish.com, and also
Global, like dash
sorry.
global-spanish.com.
That's right. And globalportuguese.co, or my Twitter handle, which is the one that I use for businesses, Gaby Vivas BTC. And and we're also on YouTube and on Instagram.
Great. And we'll put all that in the show notes. I'll also put an email address there you can send me, because I have a discount code for Gabby Global Spanish.
That's right.
So
that's
I
right.
call it Gabby Global Spanish, the Global Spanish School. So we can connect you there with that. But I think that's great, everything you're doing. And I loved how you in your story talked about. It's sad because I see this in Cuba as well. Like, I just visited, but obviously my dad is from there. He came when he was 7 years old to the U.S. His parents, my grandparents on his side, they never got to go back to Cuba after they left in 1960, and they've both now since passed. My dad's never been back. Hopefully he'll go back now with me, now that I've been there. But even visiting Cuba, the people there were really great. They were very joyous, very warm, very welcoming, but the really sad reality of what they're living through. And then you just look around, you see all these buildings are kind of crumbling. Yeah, there's this little like sparkle. You kind of see like this place was once great, but you could just see it as just deteriorated. It's almost like nobody has even like put paint on the wall in 65 years. So it's very sad in that reality. And there was every single person I met in Cuba had at least one family member somewhere else, mostly the United States. And many people I met, their dream was just to leave and go mostly to the U.S. But there's also many people who are just like, no, we're sticking it out and we're going to try to make something of it here. But I know from the time you grew up in Venezuela, Chavez had already taken over, and the whole system has changed there, and it's also becoming a very sad reality, much like Cuba. But I think what's interesting is, despite the sad realities, the ability for people to say, you know what, despite this crazy reality I'm living in, and maybe the only reality, like for a lot of people in Cuba, for example, maybe young people in Venezuela, it's like they didn't know a Venezuela or a Cuba other than this, right? And maybe things are so bad, but we all have the internet now, and we can kind of see, it looks a little better over there. But I think the mindset you had to be able to pick up, you went to the neighboring country of Colombia, but you've also been around the world. You've been in France, you've been in Russia, you're here in Argentina. I know you guys have been in Brazil and Paraguay. So that ability to kind of go and pick up and chart the next course of your life. I don't know if you could maybe reflect a little bit on maybe advise people on whatever they're going through in their life. Maybe they're living in an authoritarian country, or maybe things just aren't well in their life for whatever reason. What kind of mindset they might be able to adopt to move on to the next thing.
I always say, everybody always said, just have the faith in yourself. Have the faith in what is you're looking for. When you have a desire, you just need to write it down. Write it if you are really honest with yourself, and project that vision, because the only person who can make it is you. Nobody's gonna save you. Any system in the world is 100% perfect. There's no perfect currency. There's no perfect plan B, because that plan B could be C, D, E, F, according to different situations that could happen. But the faith is in yourself, and there's a beautiful world that you can just have in your reality. Just feel it and just try it to have that faith in you that you're gonna be capable, because we're not just only for being here on earth, we all have a purpose.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice. Put that intention out, write it down, be goal oriented with it. There are so many Venezuelan people all over the world. And now Colombia, I think, has the most of them. The United States has probably the second most. There's many in Spain. I saw this whole map where I was like, and I'm like, my gosh, imagine if all those people were just in the same place, being able to do and build with the mindset that they're doing in all the other places that they're at right now. It'd be amazing. But you're a great example of somebody who, left Venezuela and is doing a lot of great things. You're got a lot of followers all over the place thanks to this thing called the internet. And now building a great school and maybe a great life together with Jerz, who we heard from on the previous podcast. So thank you for being an agent of innovation for others to learn from. But I'll just give you some last words here if you'd like to close us out with anything.
No, thank you, Francisca, for this invite. I feel really privileged and honored to be here on your side right now and be able to be listened and understood here. There are many stories, and I have the privilege to be here to say mine, and I hope that everybody can just have that small seed planted in their head and remember that the only competition will be just only you, and have the faith in you, which is what we only are missing in this world.
That's great. So have some faith in yourself. And compete with yourself and just keep getting better. So thank you so much, Gaby, for being an agent of innovation. And thanks for being on the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Thank you, Francisco.